Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the BMW E28. Thought I'd do another installment in relation to what's happening with the BMW this time around. The car's been moving pretty quickly, only because I guess when you're in a situation where you're dealing with parts shops and stuff like that, and these parts are becoming harder and harder to come by, you kind of find yourself in the situation where you think, oh, well, look, I know I'm here for this, but good opportunity for me to buy this and X, Y, Z. There wasn't, I suppose, a great deal of E28s here, maybe. I mean, that's maybe an unfair assumption, but I don't feel like there was a great deal here, or whether or not they were supported quite well in terms of aftermarket parts and stuff. It becomes increasingly challenging to find parts for these cars because nobody's really restoring them, no one's really dealing with them, so you're limited in the way of options for the sake of getting parts for the car. So every opportunity that we get out there and we try and get parts for the problems that we're trying to solve, but then you kind of get sucked into the parts cannon and there's certain things that you want to sort out. I suppose in this episode I'll cover off on some of the stuff that has changed since the last episode. So typically you go and you spend a whole day and you put heaps of energy, you even make a video about it, and you recondition a set of wheels, and literally the next day we went and we got a set of Style 5s. So I got some B-roll this time. I thought the last video that I did was probably a bit yappy, but I did have a lot to fill you guys in with, so I know I did flap on a little bit, but this time around I got heaps of B-roll so you guys can see all of the changes that we've made. First and foremost, the thing is the Style 5. We do have a set of BBS for Toyota by BBS, as you would imagine, up on our display. So this BBS RS, these are a particular offset and all the rest of it to suit Toyota JZX 90, 100, and also to suit, I believe they're actually primarily for the Sora, but somehow one of our cars that we got in from Japan, the Mark II, had those wheels on it, so we reconditioned them. And obviously the three-piece wheels, the king, in my humble opinion, I think the BBS RS is the best wheel ever made. Argue with me in the comments if you want to, but that's just the way it is. We wanted to kind of stick to that mesh sort of BBS style wheels, so there was no other option other than the factory Style 5s that came on the E34s. We got pretty lucky in terms of finding a set that somebody was selling. They were selling the set for a reasonable price, so we thought that we would get our hands on that before they get snapped up. There's quite a bit of a fluctuation in the market in terms of how much these wheels are worth, but obviously in this case we managed to get a really good deal. So getting stuck into the changes that we made, so we did set off, as I covered off in the last video, a lot of trim pieces and bits and pieces were restored in order to get the car looking, I suppose, consistent in the way of its finish all the way around. So obviously we wanted the trims, bits and bobs to, reflect the quality of the paint. So we spent a bit of time mixing up trims like side mirrors and the kidney grills and the front grills and stuff like that. I then essentially just made, it's a rather old school method, gimbal's not playing nice right now, it's a rather old school method, but essentially I freeformed a little bit of plastic edging to make a front lip for the car. Started off as a concept of being able to make something in-house and then try and sort of outsource it, use it as a mold as such, and try and figure out how we can get something made up in a steel and or fiberglass maybe I suppose method. And so it started off as that. I got a huge roll of edging and essentially put together a lip, and it ended up looking really, really good. At some stage we will be maybe upgrading that lip to maybe something more factory, like a Zender front lip or maybe an M-Tech front lip or something like that. So essentially that's what we're aiming to do later on. So outside of the front lip, a couple of bits and pieces that we did fix up, it was really, really small minor details. Like I did mention last time around, I did want to kind of focus on the small details that really do matter in terms of the finish of the car. So we did find the aerial, so we got an aerial sorted. So we just bought the actual antenna and the mast kind of thing that goes in and out. The motor itself for the antenna was working perfectly fine. So we thought, what we'll do, we'll just replace that particular as part of the assembly, and it should be right. So it was a little bit hard to get that antenna mast out because it obviously had been there for 30 plus years and was quite, situated where it was. So that was a bit of a struggle, but eventually got it out, replaced it. It's now functioning as it should. And there's really it's so strange. I guess it's nostalgia, right? But, when you're sitting there and you flick the key back to turn it off, and then, the whole mast comes out. It's really cool. Again, kind of dorky, but it's a sort of detail that we like. It's period correct in many ways, and it's a small detail detail that really sets off the car. You know, when you do see people smiling in the rearview mirror when you hit the switch and the antenna comes up, and you can see them smiling because it's such a thing you don't see anymore, you know. So outside of the antenna, we did do the parcel shuff as well. So we pulled out the rear trims, we pulled out the rear seats and all the rest of it to get access to that. And then essentially what we did is we just spray dyed the carpet that was there just to make it look consistent with the rest of the car. I'll throw in some photos in there as well as the B-roll to show you guys, you know, how bad that actually was. So it was completely white, and essentially what that meant was that it burnt out the fibers completely because it had just been sitting in the sun. Like I say, you know, there's not much you can do about the sun, so we kind of worn a lot of it away, but we salvaged as best as we could, and now the color matches and kind of looks like, you know, it matches all the rest of the interior, which again, small detail, but makes a huge difference in the overall appearance of the car. Another thing that I did track down as well was some badges for the car. The badges that were on the car were a little bit burnt out. I still haven't got the rear as of yet. I believe that I'm going to have to go with obviously just a genuine that is made for the E28 specifically. Maybe there's like E30s or something else that also share that badge, but it's got a bit of a curve to it, and it also has this extra chrome dress ring that goes around it, so I want to make sure that it's seated really well in the place that it's got to go. So I did get the front badge, replace the front badge as well. Really sets it off. You know, the branded badge really makes a difference to the overall appearance of the car, and you know, sometimes these get nicked or they just wear out with a bit of sun damage and stuff, so it's always good to just replace those little bits and pieces that really make a difference. In the last video I did mention as well that we were having a bit of a long crank issue. So when we were going to start the car, we were having issues with the car kind of just turning and not firing over. It was firing over and it was running, but there was a situation where it was almost like the first crank that you would give it and you would go to start it, the car wouldn't start. So it made for really like awkward car park situations because the car looks super nice, and you know, regardless, you know, it doesn't matter how good the car looks. You know, you've got a situation where, you know, you're sitting there with a car that looks $1 million and then you go to start it and it doesn't start. So it kind of ruins, you know, the effect that the car has on people. So couldn't really have that. So when I had the engine work done by Tim at Berwick Motorworks, he kind of had alluded to me that just with age, these cars kind of get to that sort of stage where you've got to kind of help them out just a little bit to get them going. I felt that given the amount of money, energy and effort that we'd put into the engine reconditioning, that I felt like it's probably not right for a car to need throttle to start, irrespective of it being an early injection car and things like that. Obviously, adjusted for inflation and whatever, I mean, this car was about 100 grand when it was new. So, and back then 100 grand was like driving a house around. In saying that, you know, you shouldn't really have to put your foot on the throttle if, you know, the car was kind of back to the tolerances and condition that it would have been when it was new. I have the nature to not take no as an answer, and I kind of went on a huge parts bin. Like, I just unloaded the parts cannon on this car all the way from the, you know, front to the back, and I did quite a bit of research into what could have caused this with the car. So essentially I went through a number of parts, but it's, you know, mostly was kind of like fuel filter, which was kind of a service thing anyway. And then I installed a check valve in line. So supposedly with the E28s and stuff, the check valve that's built into one of the fuel pumps, they go bad. And when they go bad, they pull back the fuel pressure when you flick the key off. So then when you go to start, you've got to kind of build up that fuel pressure in the line before it gets to the front. I did a whole bunch of troubleshooting in that. Like I bypassed the fuel pump itself via the relay and just had the fuel pump going and then tried to crank it, no difference. So essentially the car would start, run for about a second and then turn off. We noticed it was running a bit rich when we were flicking the key. We thought, okay, well, it's got something to do with this starting procedure. The other models have that 7th injector in order to help it start in the morning, so they kind of squirt an extra bit of fuel. The ECU tells the injectors to squirt just a little bit more fuel, gets it into a rich condition, and that allows the car to start in cold mornings. That doesn't really suit the Australian climate because, you know, 98% of the country doesn't get snow. The whole cold start thing isn't necessary. It just adds complication to a system that's already primitive in the way of how it works. First thing was to eliminate that as a thing. After having done literally every troubleshooting thing you could do, changed plugs, checked coils, checked leads, checked ECU voltages at the loom, checked a whole bunch of things and really wasn't getting anywhere. I searched on the internet to try and find something similar. Yeah, and pretty much everybody that had the issue with these cars, they would have the issue and then they would just sell the car because they could not get to the bottom of it. I refuse to have that be the reality of this particular car because it's so special. And so the hunt continued, and yeah, did quite a bit of research and, you know, leaned on a couple of the experts in relation to BMWs that I have at my disposal, and no answers. Essentially what it was in the end, which is kind of embarrassing, was the fuel pressure regulator, which I know that you're thinking, well, that's the first thing, you know, one of the first things in the fuel system you should be checking, which is true, granted, and I did. So I checked the fuel pressure regulator when the car was off, checked the vacuum line to see if there was any fuel, and because obviously the car hadn't been running for some time, maybe that fuel had time to evaporate out of that rubber line, and yeah, it didn't appear to be problematic. I had good fuel pressure, so I wasn't obviously concerned with the fuel pressure at all. I did kind of burrow myself down, and I said, I'm not leaving the shop until I figure out what this problem is. And I kind of hunkered down and went through it. And then I had this brain fart, and I was like, you know what? Let's leave the car running and check the fuel pressure regulator. And lo and behold, as soon as I unplugged that vacuum line, it was squirting fuel like 2.5 meters across the shop, which is not ideal. So the hunt began to try and find a fuel pressure regulator. There's none in Australia in the BMW network. So the result was that if you wanted to get one in from Germany, you're paying 485 Australian dollars, which is massive for a fuel pressure regulator. You probably could even, you know, make up an alternative aftermarket fuel pressure regulator and whatever, but kind of sticking with my thoughts on this particular car, I tried to keep it as original and tracked down a fuel pressure regulator through the Legends of Peninsula BM. So in the end, it was this problematic little fuel pressure regulator, get that in the shot, that ended up being the problem. So the fuel goes in the backside and the vacuum line controls there. So the diaphragm inside this had gone bad. Obviously from having been in and out of the car during the head work that was being done, it must have just dried out, and then the first time that it got any real good fuel pressure after I put the check valve in, it would have just split the diaphragm, and that was the end of it. So it's also hard to know when that actually happened and when that started contributing to the cold start. Eventually that was resolved, put the fuel pressure regulator in, fired the key over, and it ran as it should. So it's this kind of bittersweet feeling now where the car's mechanically faultless now, so it starts well, it runs well, it's economic, it's not blowing smoke, it's not chewing oil, it's not burning plugs, and it's running exactly how it should be running. So it's a celebration in one way, but it's also, you know, I guess a bittersweet end to a challenge that I was quite enjoying. So there's still a number of small bits and pieces and details that I want to get to with the car. You know, we did pick up some floor mats, some matching beige floor mats, had to do the cutout for the pedal and stuff that really set off the interior. The interior looks really complete now, and also saves you from getting all the mess on the carpets and stuff like that. There's still little details here and there. I did kind of dress up the I guess embossed, if it is embossed, probably not because it's inverted embossed, the little BMW logo on top of the intake manifold. I got out the old fine line brush and got a bit of high temp blue paint and kind of filled in the propellers, which is a nice little detail. It wasn't factory, but when you see it, you kind of think, yeah, that makes sense. So small details here and there that still need to be fixed, like the badge and things like that need to be fixed up. Fortunately, I have friends with really sharp eyes that love giving me a hard time on detail, and one of my good friends pointed out that the headlight switch, the globe inside the headlight switch wasn't working, so I couldn't handle that. So I immediately pulled it apart and managed to find another globe for it. So now that's working too. All of the dash lights and everything are working. So the car is essentially, as it sits now, just ready to drive and ready to enjoy. And sometimes that can be, like I said, a bit bittersweet because now you're kind of like, well, now what? So as happy as I am that it's finished in terms of getting it where it needs to be, I would still like to see some evolution with this car and see where it ends up. So along the journey, there was a couple more maintenance things that were done as well. So the oxygen sensor, which again has been discontinued by Bosch, which is pretty standard. The oxygen sensor has been replaced and things like that. So there's other sort of small service stuff that's been done in and around the way. It's kind of brought the car to like, you know, peak performance essentially, especially with, you know, the power that you might have lost in compression and things over the number of years is probably made up for now by the quality of fuel that we have. So now the car's running really nice, and I'm super happy with it. So now obviously that we've got the Style 5s on the car, the Style 5s really set off the lines of the car. They're super period correct, they look right, and they look like the wheel that, you know, suits it the most. You could probably go a big 17 or even a 16 would probably start looking a bit big for the car. So with the 15, it's got good 195 tyres, you know, a good section of tyre and good profile. Surprisingly, the ride comfort hasn't been compromised either. So super happy with everything, especially its aesthetic now. It's starting to look real classy and elegant and still period correct. So yeah, I guess this is where the car is at the minute. And as soon as we have any other updates about it, obviously I'll keep you guys in the loop. But at this stage, I think it's time to really enjoy the car for what it is, get some kilometres behind it and really enjoy it, get those small details when it can be done, but nothing major now the dilemma is over. So now it's just a matter of enjoying the car when we get the opportunity. Either way, I thought I'd just give you guys an update and you know, do a quick punchy video on where we're at the moment, just because you guys have been following along. We're planning as of next week, we're gonna do a lot of media on the car itself. We are going to finally get it up on the hoist, and we're gonna get a huge amount of dry ice, and we're going to get underneath the car and in and around the engine bay, because the engine bay is covered in Cosmoline. We're gonna get underneath the car, we're gonna get under all the rails and everything, and get the bottom of the car to match the top of the car. So it's gonna be mega, so keep your eyes peeled out for that video. Make sure that you have your bell icon on so you don't miss anything in the series if you are following along and enjoying the series so far. Thank you very much for following this journey with us, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.